Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm disabled and I have a service dog. His name doesn't matter for this story, but he's a golden retriever who helps me with mobility and balance issues. Getting him trained and certified was a long process, but he's been a game changer for my independence. When I was looking for a place to rent last year, I made sure to mention my service animal up front, because I know some landlords can be weird about pets, even though service animals aren't legally considered pets. When I first met my landlord, she seemed fine with it. She nodded along when I explained about my service dog, asked a few basic questions, and everything seemed normal. I should have trusted my gut when something felt off, but I really needed the apartment. The rent was reasonable, and the location worked for my medical appointments. Things went downhill fast after I moved in. Within the first month, she started making comments about my dog. She'd see us in the hallway and warn me that my dog better not be damaging her property. I always reminded her that he was a trained service animal who doesn't cause damage, but she'd just say we'd see about that. Then came the complaints. She claimed my dog was barking all day, which was ridiculous because service dogs are specifically trained not to bark unnecessarily. She said there was damage to the floors that definitely wasn't there. She started doing inspections of my unit way more often than legally allowed, always finding some made-up issue. She talked about my disability in terrible ways. One day, she cornered me in the lobby and told me I didn't look disabled. She questioned whether I really needed my dog, suggesting I was just trying to get around her no pets policy. I explained that invisible disabilities are real, and that service animals aren't pets. They're protected under human rights laws. She just rolled her eyes and said whatever. She started leaving me nasty notes about everything, from how long my dog and I stayed outside to complaints about imaginary noise violations. Every interaction felt hostile. She made it clear she wanted me gone, and she was going to find a way to make it happen. After months of this harassment, I'd had enough. I did my research and found out that Canada has these amazing provincial tribunals where you can file complaints without needing lawyers. I decided to file both a human rights complaint for discrimination based on my disability and a landlord-tenant dispute for harassment and failure to maintain the property. That's when my petty side kicked in. When it came time to serve her the court documents, I had to mail them to the address she provided on the lease. But here's the thing, she hadn't given me her home address. Instead, she'd only provided a post office box. No problem, I thought. I'll just mail everything there. I gathered all my evidence. Months of harassing emails, photos of maintenance issues she'd ignored, documentation of her discriminatory comments, records of her illegal entry attempts. The package was thick, really thick. We're talking about a stack of papers that was easily 3 inches high. I printed everything out, put it in a large envelope and sent it to her post office box via registered mail. But when I dropped it off, the postal worker told me it wouldn't fit in a standard post office box. I asked what would happen then, and they explained they'd leave a pickup slip and she'd have to come in during business hours to collect it. Perfect. I sent her an email letting her know the court documents were on their way, and that she should check her post office box. I even sent her some of the evidence files electronically numbered 23 through 28, with a note saying this was part 2 and asking if she needed anything else. I told her I wanted to make sure she had everything she needed so we could resolve this quickly. Radio silence. She hated me so much that she wouldn't even respond to make sure she had all the information she needed for court. Days passed. I knew from my research that her post office was only open during regular business hours, the same hours she worked at her day job. I also knew she probably never checked that box regularly, because who does that anymore? I sent a few more follow-up emails. First, I checked that she'd received the court documents and evidence since our hearing date was approaching. Then I sent another saying I still hadn't heard back and hoped everything was okay and that she was prepared for court. Nothing. The morning of our landlord-tenant tribunal hearing arrived. I logged into the virtual hearing platform early, all my evidence organized and ready to go. The arbitrator called our case and greeted me, then asked if the landlord was present. Silence. The arbitrator said they'd try calling the phone number on file. I watched as they called her number. It rang and rang. No answer. The arbitrator noted that it appeared the landlord wasn't available for the hearing. I explained that I'd been trying to reach her for weeks about this hearing date and had sent all the required documents to the address she provided on our lease agreement. When asked what address that was, I told them it was a post office box and that the package was quite large and required pickup during business hours. The arbitrator made some notes. I could tell this wasn't looking good for her. They asked if I'd made any other attempts to contact the landlord. I explained that I'd sent multiple follow-up emails with evidence files and reminders about the hearing date, but she hadn't responded to any of them. Since I was asking for a significant amount of money in damages and requesting multiple repairs, the arbitrator decided to adjourn the hearing and schedule a longer time slot for a new date. This actually worked in my favor. I get more time to present my case, and now I had the added evidence that she'd completely ignored a court proceeding. A few days later, she finally checked her post office box. My phone started buzzing with angry messages. She accused me of harassing her with a huge package and called the whole thing ridiculous. I explained that those were court documents she was legally required to receive, and I'd sent them to the address she provided. She argued that I could have just emailed them instead. I reminded her that I had sent her emails too, but she hadn't responded to any of them. She said she wasn't dealing with this anymore and accused me of just trying to harass her. I told her I was simply following the legal process she'd forced me into when she discriminated against me and my service animal. She tried to argue that I was being unreasonable, but it was too late. The missed court date was now part of the official record, and it made her look incredibly negligent. A few months earlier, I had actually tried to settle this whole thing quietly. I sent her a reasonable offer, just an apology and $380 to cover my out-of-pocket expenses for dealing with her harassment. She rejected it outright, saying she wouldn't apologize for anything and wouldn't pay me a cent. Well, now the number was quite a bit higher. Months of additional harassment, the stress of going through the legal process, and her complete disregard for the court system had made things much worse for her. What started as a simple request for an apology had turned into a major legal case with significant financial damage. The new hearing date was set for 3 weeks later, with an extended time slot that would give me plenty of opportunity to present all my evidence. Karen's failure to appear at the first hearing was now documented proof of her negligent attitude toward her legal obligations as a landlord. During those 3 weeks, she tried a few more times to contact me, alternating between angry demands that I drop the case and half-hearted attempts to negotiate. But it was too late for that. She'd had her chance to handle this reasonably months ago. The day of the second hearing arrived, and this time Karen showed up. She looked frazzled and unprepared, clearly scrambling to put together some kind of defense. She tried to explain to the arbitrator that she'd never received the original hearing notice, but I was ready for that. I presented my evidence methodically, screenshots of all the emails I'd sent her about the hearing, the registered mail receipt showing delivery to her post office box, her own angry messages admitting she'd eventually picked up the package. The arbitrator listened carefully while I walked through months of discriminatory behavior, harassment, and illegal entry attempts. Karen tried to interrupt several times, making the same tired arguments about my dog and questioning my disability. But now she was saying these things in front of a legal arbitrator who clearly understood disability rights law. Every word out of her mouth was just digging her hole deeper. When it came time for her to present her case, she had almost nothing. No evidence, no documentation, just complaints and excuses. She claimed I was a difficult tenant, but couldn't provide any proof. She said my dog caused damage, but had no photos or repair receipts. The contrast was stark. I had months of carefully documented evidence showing a pattern of discrimination and harassment. She had nothing but her own prejudices and poor preparation. In the end, the arbitrator ruled in my favor on almost every point. Karen was ordered to pay significantly more than my original settlement offer, not just for my expenses, but also for the illegal harassment and discrimination. She was also required to complete a course on tenant rights and disability accommodation. When we logged off the virtual hearing, I could see the defeat in her face. She'd turned what could have been a simple apology and small payment into a major legal loss that cost her thousands of dollars and damaged her reputation as a landlord. My service dog and I aren't going anywhere. My stepdad taught me that parents were supposed to show up. He never missed a soccer game, helped with homework every night, and was there when I scraped my knee or had my heart broken. My biological father was a ghost who occasionally haunted our weekends. From age 5 to 18, I saw him every other weekend. Well, I was supposed to. Half the time, he'd be passed out drunk on his couch when I arrived. Sometimes he just wouldn't answer the door at all. The rare times he was sober and awake, we'd actually have fun. We'd go to the park or grab ice cream. Those moments kept me hoping things would change, but they never did. He missed every school play, every award ceremony, every birthday party. The only time he showed up was my high school graduation, and even then he smelled like whiskey and left halfway through. Now I'm 25, working as a nurse, and trying to build my own life. My biological father's drinking got worse over the years. His mental health declined. His apartment became a disaster zone filled with empty bottles, cigarette butts, and animal waste from pets he couldn't properly care for. He's been hospitalized multiple times for suicide attempts. Our family always rallied around him. We'd clean his apartment, visit him in the hospital, talk to social workers. My aunts and uncle would coordinate everything while I helped where I could. His psychiatrist kept saying he was fine and releasing him, only for the cycle to repeat. Last month, everything came to a head. We were all gathered at my aunt's house after another one of his hospitalizations. The living room felt tense when everyone settled into their usual spots on the worn furniture. My uncle brought up the idea of getting my father declared legally incapable of making his own decisions. He said someone needed to be appointed as his guardian to get him proper help. I could already sense where this was heading when he suggested that person should be me since I was his daughter. I told him I didn't think I was the right person for that kind of responsibility. My aunt asked what I meant by that, reminding me that he was my father. I explained that he was never really a father to me and that I barely knew him beyond the chaos and emergencies. My other aunt called this a horrible thing to say about my own dad. My uncle insisted that family takes care of family, pointing out that I was young, smart, and worked in healthcare, so I understood the system. I tried to explain that understanding the healthcare system was completely different from being someone's legal guardian. I'd be responsible for all his medical decisions, his finances, and where he lives. When I suggested maybe one of them could be his guardian instead, they immediately had excuses. They told me they all had their own families to worry about. Since I was single with no kids, they assumed I had the time. The assumption stung badly. Just because I didn't have children didn't mean my life was empty, or that I had unlimited time to devote to a man who'd never been there for me. I pointed out that my life mattered too, including my career, relationships, and mental health. My uncle lectured me about how this is what family does and that we sacrifice for each other. I asked where this family loyalty was when I was growing up and needed a father. Where was the sacrifice then? My aunt defended him by saying he was sick and had always been sick. I acknowledged his illness but explained that being sick didn't erase 20 years of absence. It didn't mean I was automatically qualified or obligated to become his guardian. My aunt called me selfish for this. My uncle then played the guilt card, asking if I wanted my father to end up homeless. I said of course not, but pointed out there were other options like social services, assisted living facilities, and other family members. When I mentioned that my aunt had said she'd consider it, she clarified she'd only consider it but insisted it was my responsibility as his daughter. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. I looked around at their judgmental faces and decided to ask the question that had been bothering me. I asked what would happen if I became his guardian and he needed a place to live. My uncle admitted I probably need to let him stay with me temporarily. There it was, the real expectation. I laid out exactly what they were asking of me. I'd be financially responsible for him, legally responsible for all his decisions, and he'd live in my apartment. The same man who couldn't keep his own place clean or take care of himself. When my aunt accused me of making it sound like a burden, I told her it would be exactly that, a massive burden that would drain me emotionally and financially. My other aunt asked if I was just going to let him rot. I explained that I wasn't abandoning him. I wanted to help find him proper care with qualified people. I'd support whatever guardian was appointed, visit him, help coordinate care, and contribute financially when possible. But when my uncle asked directly if I'd be his guardian, I said no. The disappointment was thick in the room. My aunt shook her head and said she never thought she'd see the day when a daughter would abandon her father like this. I insisted I wasn't abandoning him, but recognizing my limitations and trying to ensure he got the best care possible. Then my other aunt made a threat saying they'd remember this and not to come crying to them when I needed help someday. That's when I realized what this was really about. Not my father's well-being, but their desire to pass off a difficult responsibility to someone else. They wanted to feel good about helping while making sure the actual work fell on someone else's shoulders. I told them that if caring about my own well-being made me selfish in their eyes, then I'd be selfish. I spent 20 years hoping for scraps of attention from a man who chose alcohol over his daughter. I wasn't going to spend the next 20 years sacrificing my life for someone who never sacrificed anything for me. I stood up and grabbed my purse, explaining once more that I'd help find proper care, contribute to expenses, and visit when I could. But I wouldn't be his guardian and wouldn't let him move in with me. If that made me the villain in their story, so be it. When I walked toward the door, my uncle called out one last guilt trip, saying my father was going to die alone because of me. I turned around and looked at them all one more time, telling them he'd been alone his whole life by his own choice. At least now he'd have professional care. 3 weeks later, my aunt was appointed as his guardian. She lasted exactly 2 months before trying to convince me to take over, claiming it was too much work for her. When I reminded her of our conversation about family responsibility, she hung up on me. My father is now in a supervised living facility where he gets proper medical care, regular meals, and someone checks on him daily. He's actually doing better than he has in years. I visit him twice a month and help with his expenses. Nature photography became my hobby during college when I needed help dealing with stress from my engineering courses. My professor suggested finding a creative outlet, so I bought a decent camera and started taking pictures around campus. What began as stress relief turned into a real passion. After graduation, I landed a job at a tech company, but photography remained my escape. I'd spend weekends at different parks and nature spots, building up a portfolio that I eventually started selling online. The money wasn't much, but it helped pay for better equipment and gas for my weekend trips. Last Saturday, I decided to visit Riverside Park. It's this beautiful spot about 30 minutes from my apartment with walking trails, a small pond, and these amazing oak trees that are perfect for photography. I'd been there a few times before and always got great shots of the wildlife and scenery. I arrived around 10 in the morning with my camera bag and tripod. The lighting was perfect, overcast but bright enough to capture the details in the tree bark and leaves. I spent about an hour photographing different angles of this massive oak tree near the pond. There were families around enjoying the day, kids playing on the playground, people walking their dogs. It was typical weekend park activity. I was adjusting my camera settings to get a shot of some ducks on the pond when I heard heavy footsteps approaching from behind. I turned around and saw this woman walking toward me with an angry expression on her face. She looked like she was in her 40s, wearing workout clothes and had that haircut. You know the one. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing. When I asked what she meant, she accused me of taking pictures of her children. She said she had seen me doing it and called me a pervert. I looked around confused. There were kids playing near the playground area, but I hadn't even pointed my camera in that direction. I'd been focused on the trees and the pond the entire time. I tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding. I told her I was only taking pictures of nature, trees, plants, wildlife. I assured her I hadn't photographed any people, but she insisted she had seen me pointing my camera right at the kids. She kept calling me a liar and demanded to see my camera right away. My stomach dropped because this was escalating fast and I could feel other people starting to look in our direction. I repeated that I understood her concern about her children's safety, but promised I hadn't taken any pictures of them or anyone else. I explained I was a nature photographer. She called me a liar again and lunged forward to grab my camera. I pulled it back to protect it. This thing cost me $3,000 and had my entire weekend's work on it. I asked her not to touch my equipment and suggested that if she was concerned, we could call the police and they could verify what was on my camera. That seemed to make her even angrier. She accused me of threatening her and said I was trying to intimidate her. Before I could respond, she charged at me. I tried to step back, but she was faster than I expected. She grabbed for my camera strap, and when I didn't let go, she actually bit my arm. I shouted and let go of the camera in shock, and she immediately threw it on the ground and started stomping on it. I yelled at her to stop and asked what she was doing. She said she was teaching me a lesson and called me a creep. By this point, several other park visitors had gathered around. Someone was already on the phone with the police. I was holding my bleeding arm, staring at my destroyed camera equipment scattered on the ground. The lens had completely separated from the body, and the LCD screen was shattered. An older man who had been walking his dog came over to check on me. He asked if I was okay and said he had seen the whole thing. He told me the woman had attacked me out of nowhere. I explained to him that she had bit me and destroyed my camera, but that I wasn't even taking pictures of anyone. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, Karen immediately told the officer that I had been taking inappropriate pictures of children at the playground. She claimed that when she confronted me, I threatened her and tried to attack her. She said she was just defending herself and protecting the kids. The police officer looked between us and then noticed my bleeding arm and the destroyed camera equipment. He asked me to tell him what happened from my perspective. I explained the entire situation. The officer then turned to the witnesses who had gathered. The dog walker told the officer he had seen the whole thing. He explained that I had been photographing trees and plants and never pointed my camera toward the playground. He said that when she accused me, I remained calm and even suggested calling the police. He confirmed that she attacked me unprovoked. A jogger who had stopped also confirmed my story, and a couple with their own kids backed up that I had never photographed any people. The officer told everyone that we needed to go down to the station to sort this out properly. Karen complained that the whole thing was ridiculous and insisted she was the victim. At the police station, they retrieved the memory card from my damaged camera and connected it to their computer. The officer scrolled through every single image on the card while Karen stood there, tapping her foot impatiently. The officer told Karen that he had reviewed all 47 photos on the memory card. He explained that every single image was of trees, plants, birds, or landscape features. He confirmed there were no photos of people, let alone children. Karen went pale. She suggested that maybe I had deleted the photos or had another memory card hidden somewhere. The officer told her that this appeared to be a case of assault and destruction of property. He explained that the witness statements all supported my story and there was no evidence supporting her claims. They arrested Karen on the spot for assault and vandalism. The bite mark on my arm required a tetanus shot and several stitches. My camera and lens were completely destroyed, totaling over $3,000 in damage. I pressed charges for both the assault and property destruction. Karen tried to get out of it by claiming she was just protecting children, but the evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses, the photos, and the physical evidence all supported my story. 3 months later, she was convicted on both counts. She had to pay full restitution for my camera equipment, plus additional damages for my medical bills and lost time from work. She also got 6 months of community service and anger management classes. I used the restitution money to buy an even better camera setup. Karen's kids weren't even at the playground that day. I found out later that she had pointed to some random children and claimed they were hers. She was just looking for a reason to cause trouble, I guess. My wife and I had been house hunting for months. We had one main requirement that wasn't negotiable. We wanted a house with a pool. After years of apartment living and taking our two daughters to crowded public pools, we were ready for our own backyard oasis. We're both in our 30s and work full time. I'm in construction management, and my wife works in accounting. We'd saved up for years to finally buy our dream home. When we found this place in a quiet neighborhood outside Houston, we knew it was perfect. The house was a ranch style with a beautiful in-ground pool in the backyard, complete with a diving board and surrounded by a 6-foot wooden privacy fence. The previous owner was an older woman who had lived there for over 20 years. During the walkthrough, she seemed nice enough and mentioned how much she'd enjoyed the pool over the years. She said the neighbors were friendly and that everyone got along well. We made an offer the same day and it was accepted within a week. Moving day was exhausting but exciting. Our daughters, ages 8 and 10, were thrilled about having their own pool. We spent the first weekend getting settled, and the girls had already made plans for pool parties and swimming lessons. 2 weeks after we moved in, my wife took the girls to visit her family in California for a week. I was looking forward to having some quiet time to unpack the remaining boxes and maybe enjoy the pool myself after work. That Tuesday, I got home around 6 in the evening. When I walked up to the front door, I could hear splashing and kids screaming with laughter. I figured it was coming from one of the neighbors' pools, since the houses on either side of us and behind us all had pools too. I went inside, grabbed a beer, and started going through the mail. The noise continued and seemed to be getting louder. Something about it seemed off. It sounded like it was coming from right outside my kitchen window. I walked over to the blinds and peeked out toward my backyard. There were at least 6 people in my pool, 2 adults and 4 kids. They had pool floats, drinks, and had clearly made themselves at home. I rushed outside through the back door. The adults looked up when they heard the door slam. I asked them who they were and why they were in my pool. The woman, who was in her 40s with bleached blonde hair, didn't even seem embarrassed. She told me that Jane had said they could swim there whenever they wanted and that they'd been doing it for years. I explained that I had bought the house from Jane and that invitation was no longer valid. I told them they needed to leave. The woman got defensive and asked what the hell was wrong with me. She said her kids just wanted to swim and they'd been looking forward to it all day. I told her I understood, but this was private property now. I suggested they take the kids to the community pool instead. She complained that they've been swimming there for years and that Jane never had a problem with it. The man with her finally spoke up. He said they weren't hurting anything and the kids were having fun. I told them I didn't care how long they've been doing it because it was my property now. I said they needed to leave immediately or I would call the police. The woman got even more upset and asked if that's how I was going to play it. She said they just wanted to swim and that the kids wouldn't understand why some stranger was being mean to them. I told them to build their own pool or go to the community pool. I pulled out my phone and started counting down from 3 while dialing the police. The woman started gathering up their pool toys while looking at me. She told the kids that I was a jerk and didn't want them to have any fun. The kids were confused and disappointed. I warned them that if they came back again, I would file a trespassing affidavit with the sheriff's department. The woman said I should keep being a jerk and that I was going to regret this. I told her I would regret it in the comfort of my own pool. They left through my side gate, but the woman made sure to slam it as hard as she could. The next evening I came home to find my pool covered in trash, beer bottles, food wrappers, and what appeared to be dog poop floating in the water. My fence had been spray painted with the word jerk in bright red letters. I immediately called the police and filed a report. The officer who came out was sympathetic and said, "This kind of thing happened more often than people think when houses change ownership." I spent my entire Saturday cleaning the pool and repainting the fence. I also installed locks on all the gates and put up no trespassing signs around the property. 2 days later, I caught Karen trying to climb over my fence. She was halfway over when I came outside. I asked her what she was doing. She claimed she had left her pool float in there yesterday and just wanted to get it back. I told her there was no pool float in there because I had cleaned everything out. I ordered her to get off my fence before I called the police again. She said I couldn't keep them out forever and complained that it used to be a friendly neighborhood before I moved in. I told her the neighborhood was still friendly, but she just wasn't part of my neighborhood anymore. I took out my phone and started recording her. I told her I was documenting this for the police report I was about to file. She climbed down quickly and hurried away. When my wife and daughters returned from California, I told them what happened. My wife was furious, and my daughters were upset that someone had been mean to their dad. The following weekend, we were having a family barbecue in the backyard when Karen and her family showed up at my fence. She pointed at me while her kids pressed their faces against the fence slats. She told the kids that I was the mean man who wouldn't let them swim anymore. My 10-year-old daughter walked over to the fence. She asked Karen why she was being mean to her dad and told her this was our house now. Karen told my daughter that I was the mean one and that I wouldn't share. My wife walked over to the fence and told Karen she didn't know who she thought she was, but she needed to stay away from our property and stop harassing our family. She said we had security cameras now, and if Karen came back again, we would press charges. Karen complained that we were all the same and had no sense of community. My wife told her the community pool was 2 blocks away and she should use it. That was 3 months ago. We haven't seen Karen since then, but I did learn from my neighbor across the street that she and her family got evicted from their rental house for not paying rent. They moved in with her mother-in-law about 30 minutes away. I started going to this gym about 3 months ago because my office job turned me into a human pretzel. Sitting at a desk all day and ordering takeout when I'm too tired to cook wasn't doing me any favors. My doctor told me I needed to move more or my back would give out before I turned 30. The gym I picked is pretty basic, but it gets the job done. It's one of those chain places with decent equipment and reasonable prices. The only annoying thing is parking. The gym's lot is tiny and always full, so most of us end up parking on the street. It's all public parking, no meters, no time limits, just regular street spots that anyone can use. I usually go after work around 6 p.m. Traffic is still heavy, so I like to get there, work out, and avoid the worst of the rush hour on my way home. I've gotten into a routine where I park wherever I can find a spot, go in for about an hour, then head home to meal prep for the next day. Last Tuesday was leg day for me. I've been dreading it all week because my previous session left me walking like a newborn giraffe for 3 days. But I was determined to stick with my routine. I drove around the block twice before finding a spot right across from the gym entrance. Perfect! I pulled in and was grabbing my gym bag from the passenger seat when I heard heels clicking on the pavement. Before I could even get out of my car, this woman appeared at my driver's side window. She looked to be in her 30s, wearing expensive-looking workout clothes and carrying what seemed like a fancy yoga mat. I greeted her politely, thinking maybe she needed directions or something, but then she told me I was parked where she usually manifests. I was confused and asked her what she meant. She explained that she meditates in this exact spot before leg day and called it her charging space. She claimed she'd been using this spot for her pre-workout rituals for months. I looked around confused. We were on a public street. There were no signs, no reservations, nothing that indicated this spot belonged to anyone. I pointed out that this was just a regular parking spot and that I was just there to work out, but she insisted I didn't understand. She went on about doing her visualization there and connecting with the Earth's energy through this specific location. She said her entire workout depended on centering herself in this exact spot. She gestured dramatically at the patch of sidewalk next to where I'd parked. I noticed she had some kind of crystal hanging from her neck and was clutching what looked like sage. I told her I understood she had a routine but reminded her that this was public parking and anyone could park there. She claimed her spiritual practice was more important than my convenience and asked if I had any idea how hard it was to find a parking spot with the right energy alignment. I was starting to think this lady might be having some kind of episode. I mean, who claims ownership over a public parking spot because of energy? I tried to lighten the mood by saying I was just there to sweat, not steal her energy. Her face went red and she started waving her hands around, telling me I was disrupting months of spiritual work and that this spot was attuned to her vibration. Then she did something that really caught me off guard. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my car, my license plate, my bumper stickers, everything. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was documenting this violation of her sacred space and that the universe would remember this. She leaned down to my window level and looked me dead in the eye. Then she told me she hoped my glutes would cramp. After that, she walked off toward the gym. I sat in my car for a minute trying to process what just happened. Part of me wanted to just drive away and find another gym, but I'd paid for a membership and I wasn't about to let some crystal-waving parking spot gatekeeper scare me off. I went inside and had what I thought was a pretty normal workout. I did my usual routine: squats, lunges, leg press, the works. Everything felt fine. I was actually proud of myself for pushing through heavier weights than usual. But then I got home. The cramps started about an hour after my shower. Not just regular post-workout soreness, but actual painful cramps in both my glutes that had me walking like I've been riding a horse for 12 hours straight. I tried stretching, foam rolling, hot baths, everything. Nothing helped. The cramps lasted for 3 days. 3 whole days of barely being able to sit down properly. My coworkers kept asking if I was okay because I kept making weird faces every time I had to get up from my desk. Now here's the thing. I'm usually pretty skeptical about this kind of stuff. I don't believe in curses or manifestation or any of that. But the timing was just too weird. I've never had cramps like that before, and they started right after my encounter with that woman. I went back to the gym the following week, but I made sure to park somewhere else. I saw her there, in her spot, sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk with her eyes closed and crystals arranged around her. She looked up when I walked past and gave me this knowing smirk. She asked if I was feeling better with this satisfied tone in her voice. I just kept walking, but honestly, I'm kinda spooked. What if she actually did something to me? I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that she somehow made those cramps happen. I've been parking 3 blocks away ever since just to be safe. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.